Hello! Josh Levenhagen here. Welcome to your weekly family ministry devotional, and hello to any of my friends and family who have been watching these videos I make every week. Thank you guys so much for checking them out. So I'm going to go ahead and do announcements at the end, like always, and we're going to go ahead and jump right in. There is a verse that's been floating around the internet a lot lately and become the topic of discussion and even rants and arguments by our Christian brothers and sisters and my minister friends. The verse has been used to argue about whether or not to go back to church in person. And considering we're only 1 week away from returning to live worship ourselves here at Christ Church, we'll be resuming on August 16th if everything continues to go according to plan. I feel like this is a relevant discussion to be having, and I feel like if we want to continue to build the unity of the body of Christ, we need to talk about this for just a few minutes and kind of dig into the word a little bit. So I decided that my devotional this week would be about that verse and about the subject of meeting together as Christians. And I hope you'll bear with me and kind of allow God to speak to you as he's been speaking to me and speaking to all of us about just kind of our understanding about the functioning of the body and how all of that works. So let's just dig in right now. So I know you guys have heard the verse basically paraphrased saying that don't neglect meeting together. And while that is definitely true in the literal sense, it's also not some sort of universal doctrine. It is a single verse that has more verses around it, and I want to read those real quick before we go any further. So the verse actually comes from the book of Hebrews, chapter 10, and it starts. We're gonna look at the entire section here, but it's verse 25. But I'm gonna start reading at verse 19. I want you guys to hear this. So Hebrews 10:19. Therefore, brothers, since we have confidence to enter the holy places by the blood of Jesus, by the new and living way that He opened for us through the curtain, that is, through His flesh, and since we have a great priest over the house of God, let us draw near with a true heart in full assurance of faith, with our hearts sprinkled clean from an evil conscience and our bodies washed with pure water. Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for He who promised is faithful. And let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. So as you can see, the passage is not necessarily talking about what we're using the verse in context for. It doesn't mean that it's not saying that we should be meeting together. It is, but there's a completely different reason for this. I want to take you back to the first century. Paul is writing here, presumably Paul, we don't know who wrote the book of Hebrews, but this book is written to the Jews. It is meant to help them understand how their cultural and religious heritage has brought them to this point of Jesus, how being one of God's special people, that everything about their heritage revolves around the person of Jesus, that they can have an assurance, a foundation, a history, a legacy to look back on, that they can have something firm to plant their feet on. Because you have to understand that Christians in the first century, it was a very interesting thing to be, because the Romans were occupying all of Israel. Hellenistic culture had been coming in through the conquest of Alexander the Great. Cultures were infringing upon the Jews, and the Romans kind of represented the military arm of that this forceful intrusion and destroying of their culture, their authority, their heritage, everything about what they felt like it meant to be a Jew. So the Jews and the Romans, they resented each other. So we already had the governing authorities looking sideways at them, but now we had this Jewish sect that they called the followers of the way, these new baby Christians, this church made up of Jews and now Gentiles who were looked sideways at not only by the Romans, because they're like, you guys are doing nothing but trouble for us, but the Jews, who considered them heretics, who considered sometimes so far as to be worthy of death. And yes, there were definitely pockets of some decent, safe times in the first century, but overall, Christians were definitely persecuted pretty consistently up until like the 3rd century. So like, or 4th, whatever you consider the 300s, however you say that, the 300s. Christians, and especially Jewish Christians, were not in the most secure, strong place. It was not this sort of universal understanding. Nowadays, when we're Christians, people have 2,000 years of history to reference when they hear that. You can go all over the world and find cathedrals and churches and this dynasty build up to our faith. But these Christians, to them, their faith was brand new. Their understanding was brand new. And it was very easy to kind of fall into the temptation of wavering, of not wanting to be seen in public with their Christian brothers and sisters, to kind of mold this faith over, but not necessarily be out in front and center. And so the writer of Hebrews here is saying to encourage each other, to hold each other strong to your commitment, because it's not like there were regular, days where it was just like, here, all the Christians will be here on this day every single week. Things had to kind of be played by ear. And yes, they definitely, I'm sure, had their own routines, but whenever they saw each other, it was important for them to encourage each other and push each other and try to hold each other strong. In many ways, the culture was similar to what we have now. We just taken this long to experience any sort of difficulty when it comes to us meeting together. But there's Christians all over the world who are downright hunted for meeting together. So it was a similar situation where it was just not the easiest thing to do, but Paul wanted them to do it. I love what this commentator says. I have a commentary that I use for this part of the Bible, and I really, really like how he sums up these verses. He says, the author has told us how to respond to Christ's work. Through his atoning sacrifice and living intercession, we must draw near to God in worship, confident of his welcome. Because God is the faithful fulfiller of promises, we must keep a firm grip on the hope we confess. The approach of the day on which that hope will arrive in full must move us to care about each other's needs and to cultivate each other's faith, lest any lose their moorings and drift into ruin. So in this part, meeting together is simply the catalyst by which that we encourage each other in our faith. And I will definitely admit to people who are passionate about this verse that not meeting together has caused some people to waver. God made us as social beings. He's made us as beings who build our lives in fellowship with one another. But I'm going to look at another passage, and I kind of want to look at the broader picture of what we as Christians should be doing all the time with each other, not just right now, and how obsessing over the physical meeting with each other is missing the entire point. We're going to actually go back to Acts chapter 2, and we're going to go to verse 42. It's called the fellowship of the believers. We want to talk about Christians fellowshipping with each other. Here's what Christians did. Right as the church was beginning in Acts chapter 2, this is what the Christians did. This is what they were known for. They devoted themselves to 4 things, and they regularly practiced 2 more things. Verse 42 says, and they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, and to the fellowship, to the breaking of bread, and prayers. And awe came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were being done by the apostles. And all who believed were together and had all things in common, and they were selling their possessions and belongings and distributing the proceeds to all, as any had need. And day by day, attending temple together and breaking bread in their homes, they received their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having favor with all the people. And the Lord added to their number day by day those who were being saved. So first of all, they devoted themselves to teaching. They devoted themselves to the teaching of the apostles. They had teachers in their midst who studied the word and would continue to share the things they had learned with them. They did not neglect teachings. Now, nowadays, we have plenty of ways to have teachings. Pastor sends out his videos every week. I send out my videos every week. There are plenty of ways to us to connect to Right Now Media, and ministries of many different sorts are available through the amazing invention of the internet. So there are plenty of ways to receive biblical sound teaching nowadays without having to go to church or go to temple every single day or to meet together. Secondly, they devoted themselves to fellowship, to the breaking of bread. They devoted themselves to being around each other and spending time with each other. Yes, they did. Then they also devoted themselves to food. I love that. To the breaking of bread. They kind of merged that together with fellowship. I am a huge, passionate person about food and fellowship. I think it's a biblical thing, and I'm very, very happy to share food with my fellow Christians. I think it's a bonding practice. I think it is something that brings us closer together. I think it's something that God invented for a reason, and Jesus used it widely when he was eating with people who were not accepted in society. So I love food and I love fellowship. And yes, the disciples, the new Christians, the church devoted themselves to this. We can still devote ourselves to fellowship without necessarily always being in person. Fellowship is this idea of us being together and sharing each other's burdens, sharing each other's needs, thanks to, again, the technology of the internet, of Zoom meetings, of Google meetings, of FaceTime, of video game servers, of cell phones, of sitting on someone's front lawn 6 feet away from them, 6 to 10 feet away from them. Me and my wife, we sit on her parents' yard right now because they're in isolation right now. But fellowship does not necessarily mean we have to be in church every single Sunday or we're not fellowshipping. Who are you fellowshipping with in your own family, in your own life? And what are you doing to reach out to the people that you can't be physically around? Fellowship is not necessarily just physically meeting together. Food, you can be cooking food, you can be donating food. We are constantly right now donating food to our local food banks because the difficulty, the financial difficulty this is causing the economy is causing widespread difficulty. There's people that are going to start being evicted when the moratorium on evictions is going to be lifted, if it hasn't been already in many states. You can be gifting people food in many different ways right now. There's a lot that we can do with food and fellowship that doesn't necessarily have to be in person. And if you obsess over that, you will miss the opportunities God has for you to serve other people. And finally, they devoted themselves to prayer and to the prayers. They prayed together for each other's need and over each other. Again, something that we can do through prayer change, through calling people on the phone and praying over them. There are many different ways that we can do that without necessarily being here in person. So, teaching, fellowship, food, prayer, there are ways that we can do all of those without being in person. And being in person, being together physically, is not the prerequisite for following God's will and doing what the church did in the early days. And the thing that they were known for, the thing they were constantly being practicing, was generosity and thankfulness, which are two, ironically or interestingly, coincidentally, those are two things that we are actually in short supply of right now as a church and as a human race. We are not being generous. We are holding on to what we have because we are terrified we're going to lose it. People hoarding toilet paper and fighting over masks and sanitizer. These shortages are caused by people not being as generous as they could be and not sharing with the people of the things that they have. You're going to find a lack of generosity right now, and that's something that the church needs to be known for. It's fullness of generosity and thankfulness. Many of us are still, have a place to live. Most of us do. Many of us are still having employment. Even the worst of us that are off are still have access to clean water and a place to sleep and food to eat. We are in a country that, even no matter what you believe about how well we're handling this, we are in a country that is full of blessings. And every single day we wake up to something to be thankful for. Thankful for the blessings that we have received even so far. Even, let's say that we don't feel like being thankful for anything that we have right now. We can be thankful for the good times that God has given us in the past, and thankful that He is going to be bringing us through the difficult times. Generosity and thankfulness are something that the church needs to be known for. So what am I getting at here? What am I getting at is that, yes, meeting together, I believe, is absolutely biblical. God has made us social creatures. But I do not think that meeting together is a prerequisite for obeying the scriptures when it comes to our actions as Christians. We can be learning, we can be loving, we can be feeding, and we can be praying without having to come to a specific place at a specific time on a specific day of the week and be here in person. And I think that we need to drop this obsession with that, and I think that we need to be more generous and more loving to our fellow Christians because all of us are trying to navigate this time together. None of us know exactly what we feel like is the right way to be doing this, but all that we know is that we're trying to trust in God to take care of us and trust in the wisdom that He has given us in our own lives to try and make the decisions that we feel like are the best for ourselves, for our families, and for our churches. We need to, as a church, not be so obsessed with rights being taken away, and we need to be obsessed with loving the rest of the world the way that He has commanded us to love them, and growing closer to God the way that He has commanded us to grow closer to Him, and stop worrying about everybody else's business. So that's what I've got for this week. Thank you guys so much for tuning into my devotionals. So, announcements. I've got just one big announcement. Obviously, next week on August 16th, we will be returning to live services. As I've stated before, the plan right now is to have one live service at 10 a.m. Social distancing will be required. The pews have been marked off. Masks will be required, as is required by our state and our city. You will have to wear a mask if you are anyone 5 and older. You will have to wear a mask to be inside the building. And we will be doing rotational, people will be moving through the building from one end to the other instead of congregating in the lobby. We will not be having a worship, corporate worship. We will be having things like special music. Our family ministry will be kicking off the week of September 13th is the current plan. And up until then, the 4 weeks up until then, we're just going to get kind of into the swing of things and find out how many people would like to be here. Regardless of when and how we start family ministry, long term we will be offering at-home resources, digital resources, physical resources, and even live video chat resources. Every single week we will be continuing to do that even after we start meeting in person indefinitely, so that no matter what decision that you feel pressed to make, no matter what decision that you are comfortable making as a family, the church will be here for you. The church will be ministering to you, for you, and with you, no matter if you are here in person or if you are worshiping with us at home. And I want to make sure everybody knows that. So I will be releasing the full document that lays out kind of all the bullet points and all the information. I'll be releasing that to you guys next week, along with a special video that kind of lays out how everything is going to work and what to expect when coming to church on Sunday. But I'm sure Pastor has more details for that as well. I'll be just focusing on family ministry. So in the meantime, God bless, stay safe. I will talk to you guys on Sunday for Children's Church Live at 11 a.m. on Facebook Live and Google Meet. Thank you guys so much. Bye-bye.